man. But how's everybody doing? What's going on, podcast? I was waiting for a sound cue, bro. I'm not gonna lie. What's going on, podcast? No, not that one, bro. Not the Windows one, bro. We making all kinds of gains. All kinds. Just because I'm wearing a tank top, bro?
Hey
No.
man, we trying out here.
You know what I'm trying to say when we talking about getting the trap club bumping, bro.
Oh, okay, I got you, bro.
We got a new podcast rolling. Let's go.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Got that upgrade production, man. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very stoked about it. So we're glad to have y'all on here tonight for another late night edition of the Catch Up Podcast. And boy, doth we have a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, man, I want to jump into this right off the top. And this is not going to be what the whole episode's about. So if you didn't come here for this, please stick around because I think you will like the second half of this episode. But this was a big story today. So basically, we're talking about a development in the world of biotech and geopolitics. So the crazy thing about this story, and also before I keep going, man, let me just remind myself to do the main thing
You
I
got
gotta do, man.
Yeah, man, you gotta share it. Gotta share it. Let
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
get it to those people's eyeballs.
You
So
gotta
everybody can check it out.
something finna hit their eyeballs, man. It's gotta be this. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
You
Oh yeah, bro.
know what I'm saying, man. Excuse me. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. You guys are rad. All right, let's get this thing shared and
Mm-hmm.
shared. All right, double shared. All right, so here's the crazy thing. This today, I want to attribute this properly. This report comes out from Washington Post, and what the crazy thing about it is to me is it low key in a certain way. I didn't just say low key because Dennis and I spent 20 minutes talking about Marvel. Um, in certain ways, it affirms some conspiracy theories when the pandemic was just taken off. Okay,
Mm.
so let's here's some quick details on this. In April 2020, China gifted Serbia a cutting-edge lab called FireEye, which has the capability of genetic testing, not just for viruses, it turns out, though. That's what it was sold as,
Mm.
but also it is for human genomes as well. These labs have proliferated globally, reaching four continents and more than 20 countries, including Canada, Latvia, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, South Africa, and Australia. And it's interesting because, there's a lot of it in Africa, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know why that is or what they're trying to gain out of it. When you read on, it certainly feels like they're trying to gain out of it. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
say anything different for a first world country necessarily when
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about China, right? It does
Yeah.
make you wonder what they're trying to gain from this. What's the concern? Let's find out, friends.
Mm-hmm.
Human DNA database. FireEye Labs could potentially contribute to a massive collection of global genetic data. Chinese officials have framed these efforts as beneficial for public health and scientific research, but Western analysts worry about other applications such as bioweapons or mass surveillance. So,
Mm.
bioweapons being, so there's a world um, arrangement of rules of what can and cannot be used in war, which is very weird, right? But
Yep.
it is what it is.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's part of the Geneva Convention.
yes,
Convention.
exactly. That would prevent bioweapons.
Mm-hmm.
Mass surveillance, I think of, I've said this a few times over the course of this show. Um, Minority Report.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where Tom Cruise's character walks into this mall and it scans his eye and knows who he is, what he's interested in, and does custom advertisements as he walks into the mall. Um, Stuff like that, right? That's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Another concern is economic leverage. Genetic information is often dubbed the new gold in scientific circles. China has its eyes set on becoming the world leader in biotechnology by 2035, If it succeeds, it could hold immense economic and strategic power over its global rivals, particularly the United States. So let's dive into that one a little further. What does that mean to you, man?
Um,
Because
I
I was
mean
trying
it.
to decipher that one too. You know,
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I guess my thought process on it is that it can be that there is just overall more like they're ahead when it comes to. I think it's something akin to one of the similar to like one of the AI, gosh darn, one of the more recent AI models was able to map um like all the proteins known to man essentially, right? Like get a
right.
full genetic structure of all of those proteins. So I think it would be something similar to like if you have that type of data, you can now use that data to better create um different types of um
Like
gosh darn,
medicine
yeah,
treatments, and then
treatments, medicines, all
therapeutics.
that stuff, right? And
That
so, or go ahead.
no, dude, you had opened up exactly where my mind was going, man. Thinking
Mm-hmm.
the exact same thing. It makes it. I mean, it just feeds right into that major um, conspiracy theory.
Mm.
They're using this to intentionally, perhaps, or maybe not, but they could intentionally trigger another pandemic that would take out non-Chinese people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could have it. Yeah. Because technically, right, in theory, I guess that's the biggest thing that we really need to say is that this is a theory, of course, but in theory, um, there is a possibility of you have enough diverse genetic material. And then you can say, okay, so um, this type of racial group, right? Or in truth, I should really say this type of um, person from this ethnic background, because in truth, race is more of a political construct rather than an actual like factorial one.
Definitely.
Um, but but you could say someone from this ethnic background has this type of genetic sequence, like all of them share this type of genetic sequence. And then I guess technically you could modify a virus or something similar to that to um only target this group of people. Now, of
Yeah.
course, there's going to be outliers, just like there is in any sort of study. But yes, you could technically target it that way. Um, Now, you can also do this the inverse way, right? You can create a vaccine that works perfectly, right? This is at the peak of this, right? You could essentially create a vaccine or a cure for essentially any type of disease um, that would affect this one single person because you
Yeah.
have enough genetic information to understand what will and what won't work really well with their genetic makeup.
Yeah.
And then you'd be able to kind of go from there. So you can do the same thing. You can do something really great with it, or you can do something really bad with it. So, um, that's kind of where that leads into, right?
Well, that's a really great point, man. But still, it would be self-serving, man, because
Mm-hmm.
if another world pandemic happens, whether it's because of them or just happenstance, um, they have now placed themselves through manipulative behavior to be at the top of the market for it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I think we nailed it on the head. And man, I'm only halfway through what we're going to talk about on this. And it's just crazy. People who were first labeled as conspiracy theorists are now being validated, man, by a major publication in the Washington Post. I
Mm-hmm.
will say I never fully doubted the idea that China was benefiting on this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, shoot, man. I mean, there might be ways that are not being reported about how America benefited on this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to state that um there is it's like a partial validation, right? Because it's not a
Absolutely.
full verification or anything like that. We're not admitting that any of these conspiracy theories are fully true or anything like that. It's just there is a higher amount of evidence to that there um that the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, or I guess I should really just say the Chinese government,
Mhm.
may have been using um, this institution to be able to collect multiple sets of data or DNA data to use for various research purposes.
True.
Um, that is the facts that we have currently, right?
Right.
We can infer from what has been used in some of the other data that we know about, or there's some of the other facts um to get to have a little bit more to be able to get to the conclusions that we are at. But I just wanted to kind of say that just as a kind of like a disclaimer.
Without a doubt. I mean, you're absolutely right on that. I do think that, you know, if you add up everything given this situation of the start of COVID-19, um, right before it came a pandemic here in America, right, which was kind of one of the lasting places, the
Hmm.
final places. Right after that, they start rolling this machine out. Without everything else, you'd be like, man, it could just be coincidental timing. It sounds like that would take something that takes a lot of prep, you know,
Hmm.
to get ready. But man, it's just so weird how it was also beneficial in helping find the cure to COVID-19. It's a temporary cure, right? It's like the
Hmm.
flu vaccine.
Hmm.
I just find it interesting, bro. I'm not trying to lay claim necessarily, but this again, official article from the Washington Post, not biased, um, is leaning the direction, a little bit. Don't you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they may be. I think that the article does have some sort of lean towards it could be something that they're collecting data for, or they use the moment of COVID to collect data to better um create a something that could be something like a biological weapon or something similar to that. um
Sure.
uh but I don't know. I honestly, I it's hard for me to fully say. Um,
I
but
get
one thing that I will say too, going into what you were saying, is that it is interesting to note that um, of course, I'm sure this organization also helped in the efforts to be able to create a vaccine in a record time,
Oh, for sure.
fastest time that we've ever been able to create a vaccine um for a disease like this.
Absolutely.
um so I do think that it did help in that regard, but I do think there is something to the fact that when COVID happened, they kind of jumped out and like automatically started collecting this type of information that could be incredibly useful for, say, another trial in some ways, right?
Right. And using that mRNA technology, right, for this vaccine.
Mhm.
And mRNA, you know, people kind of got and still are obviously nerve wracked. Oh, they have this new technology. They're trying to control us. mRNA had actually been worked on and built a foundation out of for cancer vaccines. That's what it
Mhm.
was made for. And what's great about mRNA um, vaccine in general is it has this adaptive foundation
Mhm.
that you can alter to treat this, that. So the goal is to speed up the times of critical vaccines, which just happened to be a worldwide blessing that they had already started working on that before COVID hit, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So, um, okay, moving on with the issues here. Data security and privacy. Critics point out that the Chinese company BGI, which manufactures FireEye Labs, which was the name of this machine, or who built this machine,
Hmm.
has deep ties to the Chinese government, raising questions about who ultimately has access to the sensitive genetic information.
Mm.
And ethical concerns. Some U.S. officials argue that BGI and its subsidiaries have been involved in analyzing genetic material for the Chinese government's crackdown on ethnic and religious minorities, although
Mm.
BGI denies these allegations. Um, Another thing that I read that's not included in this rundown is that they also received, I'll go back and verify this, but they also received genetic material from the U.S.
Mm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
you know, let me double check this real quick. Okay, that's what it was. Um, BGI acquired the patents to the American firm's DNA sequencing machines and began making and selling the equipment through a spin-off company.
Ah, I see. Interesting.
Yeah. So, um, but oh, this is what I found. Okay, this is a critical piece of information.
Hmm.
Okay, by 2019, through business partnerships and stock purchases, nearly 2 dozen Chinese companies had acquired the rights to genetic data and other private records of U.S. patients, according to a 2019 report prepared by the U.S. government, U.S. China Economic and Security Review Commission. During the same period, U.S. law enforcement officials were tracking hacking attempts involving companies with large troves of genetic data. A Justice Department indictment in 2019 accused Chinese operatives of illegally accessing patient databases at 4 U.S. companies. The hackers are believed to have siphoned the private healthcare data, including DNA information, of more than 80 million Americans, according to prosecutors, man.
That's crazy.
Yes, so that went on before this machine started rolling out. So it sets a bad tone. You know what I'm saying? And it's all going down at the same time. BGI, the parent company of this tech, is
Hmm.
rolling out with America trying to get more DNA tech, right?
Yep.
Now, let me be clear. We view this as like the most synthetic way to tell people apart, right?
Yeah.
But really, that technology is needed for the future of making a world that is cancer free, virus free, pandemic free. It is critical. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
Uh,
It is. It is.
yeah,
It.
but there's a good side to this. Hopefully.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just like the AI tools that we talk about, um, that we've talked about many times during our podcast, which is they can be used for amazing, wonderful, great things, and then they can also be used for very terrible things. And it's just one of those things that you have to um, kind of hope that it's used properly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the role of any new technology, right? Although, again, the difference with this is the rollout of this technology at the time that it happened, and taking advantage of desperation when needed materials or in need for materials and just resources for the pandemic, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so we'll move on with this. It says the role of that. Here's the role the pandemic played. COVID-19 served as an unexpected catalyst. Unexpected, just so we're clear. So even Washington Post is saying it was not intentional to be the catalyst for this machine. Okay,
Yeah.
for this global genetic data collection effort. The pandemic opened doors for Chinese companies to deploy their technologies worldwide under the guise of public health, which has allowed for an
Mm.
expansion in collecting genetic data. So they did use it, according to this report, um, in a manipulative way, but they didn't push forward the pandemic to make it work. You
Yeah,
know, so that's a critical piece.
that's a really good for the context of it.
It is. While the advancements in biotechnology offer promising avenues for healthcare and scientific research, they also present challenges and ethical dilemmas that cannot be ignored. As China aggressively pushes its biotechnological capabilities, it's crucial to consider not just the benefits, but also the potential for misuse and the impact on global geopolitics. Um, sorry. So here's what I think about this, and I do believe that we did touch on um what the concern would be about this. There's this movie, and if you're in the comments, let me know if you remember what it was called. I'm gonna do a quick Google search. Um, see if I can find it. Gattaca. Let me know in the comments if you've seen the movie Gattaca. Have you seen that, bro?
I have not. I have not seen Gattaca.
Believe it or not, man, I actually watched this movie in one of my high school classes. I believe it was.
Oh wow.
What this movie is about is genetic engineering and how you basically create an even more separated, like hierarchical society. People that run it profit off of it, live big time like sports stars.
Mhm.
Their family was rich and were able to afford genetic engineering that give them the abilities to run faster, jump higher, right? Think
Yep.
quicker, that type of thing.
Exactly.
Whereas normal people who are not necessarily dumb or lack anything, right? They just don't have that genetic twist or engineering to them. They live in property, or I'm sorry, that'd be a blessing if they did that. They live in poverty
Mhm.
because they can't afford the experiments that will get them to that next almost superhuman level, you know.
Wow.
And that is, I think, a very realistic approach to something that could happen.
Mhm.
Not saying it would, but it's those among the things that we mentioned earlier that really makes me concerned about this gathering of genetic data, right?
Yeah, same. Same because yeah, there's just like, like the article said, like you said, DNA is probably going to be the next frontier when it comes to overall.
Just development of
Pardon
human
me.
health.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Human health as well as, of course, human weapons, right?
Well, how
Um,
do you feel with human weapons? Are you thinking like GI Joe type people?
I mean, yeah, technically
Uh-huh.
there is that possibility. But I was also thinking of, biological weapons. Um, you could because I mean,
What,
technically,
like
I
Mega
guess.
Man? Go.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Or you could create I don't know, the Hulk or whatever.
Mhm. But true
um
though. I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously not as something as comic-ish as that, but you could do something to that effect. Give a person superhuman strength through that genetic engineering, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the darn, I lost it. But I think yeah, it gives an upper leg to or upper hand, sorry. Gives the upper hand to people who have who are the have nots and who aren't the who can afford that process,
Yeah.
right? It's similar to which I would imagine this would come into this play, but it's that designer baby aspect, right? You can design people to be um I don't know, the best, right? You can make sure that they are resistant to, developing, say, cancer and resistant to developing like different sorts of diseases,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as well as, the regular stuff of like, I don't know, being able to run super fast, be able to have like I don't know, superhuman strength and all sorts of other stuff.
Sure. Well, absolutely. For a war, and that's the thing you just can't help but think about with our world, right? Is how this
Hmm.
would benefit them. It may not be the initial intention with some of these people, right?
Yeah,
But if you
exactly.
have that genetic material on file, right? And they look at like the Dwayne the Rock Johnson, they're like, you know what? What if all of our people had that strength of Dwayne the Rock Johnson, right? Or that capability
Hmm.
of growing that strength? It just is going to help their human side of um, military fighting. And, there's rumors that like top secret intelligence people have that kind of stuff manipulated in them, you know,
Hmm.
or have technology that give them that kind of strength. So to be able to manipulate their genetics where it's natural, that'd be insane, man.
Yeah, that would be.
One thing I do want to say about this, because you know us, if you've been here for a while, we're not the ones that like to attack people based off a political story, right?
Hmm.
One thing I will say from our our perspective, right? Well, and specifically from mine as well. You see the government attacking TikTok, right?
Hmm.
Oh man, don't let TikTok steal our people's data. Don't let it steal their information, right? But
Hmm.
meanwhile, Facebook/ Instagram very much does that, right? But here's the
Yeah.
difference. They're American. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And I trust Washington Post. I'm not putting it against them necessarily. For them, it may be a reason that they were able to collect this data, but not for a similar type of work going on in the United States. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I mean, you got me hard to believe that China's the only one that's putting this together, bro. You know what I
Oh yeah.
mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So, especially one of the lines that we read in there, they are working to be one of the world leaders. One of the world leaders, right? So guess who that other one is? It's probably
Hmm.
us, man. So
Hmm.
I think this is something that we should cover as time goes on because to consider that it's what going to be a developing thing and developing within the next 12 years, that's a pretty big and considerable thing. So
Yeah.
on one hand, it should enlighten us for the future of healthcare. It really should.
Hmm.
It really should. That I mean, for many people, that should just be a world relieving kind of a thing. Um, but on the other hand, man, you just don't know what's going to be going on behind the scenes, like the
Yeah.
UFOs, man. We know they're out there. We don't know what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, man. You're right. It really could be that.
It could be, man. So anyway, I think we had a good discussion on this. Let's go
Hmm.
ahead and slap into our next topic, man.
Yeah, man.
I got the best way to do it. Let's roll the intro, man. All right. Look, now that we've tackled some heavy geopolitics, right? Let's shift our focus to something a little closer to home. Electric vehicles, okay? You'd be surprised to find out that some common assumptions about EV batteries are not holding up under scrutiny. But before we run into that, I want to let you I want to let you guys know the three best ways to support this show. Number one, let's get the little there you go. Okay. Oh wow, some 1.8 millimeter or one oh excuse me, 1/8 millimeter cables. Dang. Number one, leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. It will really help us out a lot. It will help us to know what you think of this episode and the podcast, and it will put us out in front of more potential listeners and leaders. Excuse me, guys. It's fall allergy season. Number two, Oh my gosh, bro. We could connect so many headphones right now. Number two is go ahead and like and subscribe if you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube. We live stream every Thursday night and get to add you into the conversation in real time with your comments and thoughts on whatever it is we're talking about. It actively manipulates and shapes the direction of this podcast. And it's our favorite part of the show. We'd love to have you involved. So type in the podcast title on Facebook or YouTube and jump in with us in real time every Thursday night. And if you catch the replay, leave your comments in too, man. We love it. Okay.
Mhm.
Number three. Oh my goodness. And a USB. That's for that Bluetooth headphone. Yep. Yep. Okay. So number three. If you want to support us monetarily, we got some really cool things in our shop. It's linked wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. Just go to the link and check it out. It's fall time, right? So what do you want to do?
Mhm.
Well, think about it. Don't take me as an example. I'm wearing a tank top right now, but for the most part, you're gonna want a nice long sleeve t-shirt, a hoodie, a hat, a
Mhm.
beanie. We got all of it. If you want to drink something warm, we got mugs for you too. You want to keep
Mhm.
your phone warm? Get you a nice catch up phone case. We got all over our shop. It's affordable. It'll go straight to you and it will help us out as well. So please check that out. And we'll go from there. I dramatized that one, bro. That's what y'all know. Okay, so um yeah, let's get into this next topic. So,
Mhm.
the common belief is that supercharging an electric car battery leads to faster degradation than regular charging, right? It's kind of like things we learned with my laptop, right? My
Yeah.
phone. Um, you want to have the proper chargers on it, especially with phones, man. And I've encountered this with my iPhone. It's easy to find things that don't charge it fast enough,
Mm.
and that
Mhm.
drains on the battery. And so there's a certain window for most batteries. Maybe you can explain that better, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So yeah, I guess when I mean battery degradation, or what we when we say battery degradation, the real big thing is over time, a essentially as a lithium ion cell, because this is more specific to lithium ion batteries. um they build up resistance, right? um from the amount of cycles, from the amount of charging cycles that um they are able to do. So, you know, just like you charge your phone a bunch of times, and over time it'll start to get less and less efficient, as well as you're able to have less and less. Well, I'll just say less and less efficient, and sometimes you find that your battery doesn't last as long. It's similar to same thing for like electric vehicles. Well, um, and so, you're 100% over time has the potential of becoming your now 90%, right?
Sure.
It still is gonna show as your 100%, of course, for your battery wise, but, the amount of range that you're getting out of your car, um, is lower, is essentially the equivalent of having that 90%. Um,
Yeah.
but, um this study kind of sheds a little bit more light on that, and helps out, I think, a lot of non-EV owners when it comes to the scares that a lot of people have, right?
Well, and inviting them into becoming part of that lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It alleviates those fears, I think, a little bit more for people. Um because yeah, I mean, I think everybody, it's always something, the one thing that I hear all the time when people, talk about, oh, when they talk about my car, they're like, well, good luck, when you have to replace your battery or whatever like that.
Right.
Because for some strange reason, people think that, you're going to replace your battery, you know,
Every
like a
5
freak.
years.
Yeah, exactly. Every 5 years, like it's a
Definitely
double
not
A
what I
battery.
said.
Well, yeah, like you're taking out a double A battery and just like plugging it back in. Oh man, I got to get my whole new
Maybe I can
battery in
roll it.
here.
Maybe I can roll it and get it to keep working,
Yeah. Exactly.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I mean, everybody loves to use that kind of same deal, but honestly, I've talked about this many times, right? Batteries nowadays, modern batteries, especially batteries that are in electric vehicles, are incredibly resilient, as well as last quite a while, right? You know, if going from multiple different auto manufacturers. I use Tesla for example because that's kind of what this study is off of, but it kind of probably applies to most EVs.
Yeah.
Is that for Tesla, right? It from the factory it comes with an 8 year 100,000 mile, depending on the variation, all the way up to like a 150,000 mile warranty on your battery, your drivetrain, all that good stuff. Um, and that's 8 years. So that's way beyond what most people, if we're looking at the typical cycle of when people get new cars, that goes far beyond that. Most people trade in or get a new car within the 5-year mark. And
Sure.
so, these batteries are lasting, and this is just the warranty. Most studies have even found that people aren't even replacing their batteries even past that 8-year mark. But
Dang.
um, I digress. Anyway, going back to our battery degradation thing,
Sure.
um, I wanted to kind of get your opinion on this article because it's talking about superchargers, and one of the biggest things about that is superchargers is um, it's charging your battery super fast. It's charging it differently than what you would normally do at home. Other than just the speed, it's pushing. So, just for really quick context, regular if you're plugging in your car directly into an outlet, plugging it into your and then, or plugging the I shouldn't say charger because technically the charger is a little different for EVs. Technically, it's on board the vehicle. So actually what you're plugging in is like just like a power supply kind of deal anyway. Anyway, um when you're plugging in, I'm just going to just for simplicity, when you're plugging in your charger into your vehicle, um you um you are using AC power, right? So this is AC power, and then there's a converter inside of your car that converts that AC current, which is what is commonly used within um, a regular household. It
Sure.
converts that into DC, which is what is used to actually charge the battery, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when you go to a supercharger, that is actually different, right? So
Mhm.
that version of the um of a charger is actually an actual charger because it's actually pushing direct current, so that's DC,
Okay.
directly into the battery. So there's no conversion needed. It's just pumping it in there. And that's also why you can get much higher speeds. That's why you can have much higher voltage, as well as yeah, as well as just all that good stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and so I guess um, you know, my thought, my one of my big questions to you is like hearing this type of news that supercharging, a lot doesn't make or makes a negligible difference when it comes to battery degradation than it does to just, like, I don't know, do half and half or even just barely using superchargers. Does this kind of what's your thought process on this whole
Well,
thing?
I find it amazing. I mean, I think that, you have to testify to the advancements of battery technology that should have that should be approached with an open mind and be expected over the next 10 to 15 years, as we um Denison and I have debated this on this podcast whether this is truly the set in stone future of automobiles,
Mhm,
uh, just due to other investments in other technology that we've seen. But um, regardless of that, I mean, to make it so it can last just as long, but you're like good to drive in 20 minutes. You know what I mean? If you're low on
mhm,
charge from your house, you have to have your house wired differently. Uh, to
well,
be. right? Or is that
Or
wrong?
no, no, no. I mean, you're not gonna get supercharger speeds for sure,
Yeah.
at your home, um, but you can get level 2 charging, which is still significantly faster than if I would have just plugged directly into like my wall outlet. And so you would wire your um you would like chain you would create or add a plug something similar to like a NEMA 5, or was it 15, 20 something? I can't remember right now. My brain is
Oh,
blanking. But it's essentially like the same plug that you would use for like a dryer.
oh,
You could essentially just add that into wherever you're parking your vehicle,
yeah.
and then plug it in there, and that's way faster than the wall plug.
Yeah. 240 volt, right?
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
240 volts,
Yeah.
30 amps usually.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. It's just impressive. It really is. And the fact that, that's even a possibility, man, is just amazing. But
Mhm.
also to make to make it so you can do that from your home and be like, "Hey, man, I'm good to go." It's not having any more effect on my battery either,
Yeah.
right? As it would for supercharging. So tell me, like, and maybe just explain to the audience too, how fast would that supercharging be done? Um, yeah, with that rolling, is it like a 5 minute charge or what is it?
Well, so sorry. Um, so all it's really saying is, for the
Well,
article
let me stop you real fast.
sorry.
You mentioned phase two, right?
Yeah.
Phase two charging.
Or there it's, just level 2. So there's
Level
3 different charging states.
level two, right? So level
Mhm.
two, you can charge in what, 20 minutes?
No, 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 it's much longer than that. So level 1 is super duper slow. So that's like if I plug into the wall, right? So that's gonna be, for instance, here at my apartment, I'm plugging directly into like a wall outlet in my garage.
Yeah.
Um, and I will get about 20% charge in maybe a span of like, let's think, maybe 10 hours. So super slow, right? Um, A
Yeah.
level 2 charger would get you somewhere in the ballpark of, say you're at 20%,
Sure.
it'll get you all the way up to, say you're charging up to 90% in maybe around 6 to 7 hours.
Wow. Okay.
So, significantly faster.
Yes.
Than a level 1. And then a level 3 charger, which is your DC fast chargers, right? Those are your superchargers. I
Okay.
have to say DC fast chargers because superchargers is a brand technically,
Yeah.
but if you were to go over to any other EVs that aren't using the Tesla supercharger network, they
Mhm.
have DC fast charging, which is supplied from via a various amount of different charging manufacturers or whatever like that. So like Electrify America, ChargePoint, EVgo, those are some of the big ones.
Yeah.
But that is where you're looking at those 20-minute times, right? Those 10 those 20-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute times, right? Depending on how fast that charger is.
Sure.
Some EVs that charge at a much higher voltage than Tesla. So for instance, like the Ionic 5,
Mhm.
if it's at 20% and it goes to a DC fast charger that is able to do a maximum of like 350 watts, right?
Yeah.
If it's able to hit that, the predicted charge time from 20%, actually, I think it's lower than 20%. I think it's like 10% to 80% is like 18 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
insanely fast, right? You plug in, done, right?
Okay.
Enough time, especially if you're going on like a long road trip. Uh, you can go to like a gas station and get whatever you need, get back into your car, and then you're essentially almost finished charging, and then you can leave again. So
Okay. Well, that's good to know because I know I've experienced some pretty fast stuff with you, man.
mhm.
which has been absolutely amazing, you know.
Hmm.
So that's my bad for not understanding it clearly.
No, that's no, it's perfectly understandable. I mean, it's EVs are it's one of those things that, um, it makes sense once you're in it, but,
Yeah,
from the outside looking, it gets a little bit confusing, and I think that is also a part of the fears that, we were talking about at the very beginning, that a lot of people have is that it's like, "Oh, man, it's gonna take so long to charge."
yeah,
Um, but, I in my time that I've owned an EV, I find that more than not, you will not be waiting on a car. I think a lot
yeah,
of people forget the thought process of or don't understand or think of. I think a lot of people still think of EVs in the same regard as they're thinking of their gas powered car, where I'm going to go to a pump, and then I'm going to fill it up, and then I'm going to go. Sure,
sure.
that does happen on, say, like a road trip or something like that. But in most cases, you're gonna plug your car in at night at home, charge up.
Mhm.
It's essentially like you have a gas station at home, right? You
Yeah,
charge up, you go sleep, you come back to your car, you're fully charged, you have a full tank of gas in a different way, and then you go, right?
mhm,
Um, and this study makes it even nicer because um what this proves, and this was done over, you know, uh, a decent amount of time, and it was sampled from, I had originally thought it was like, um 20,000, but it was 12,500 Tesla vehicles where they were gathering this data. But this is nice because, again, I think that was another thing that a lot of EV owners felt is that, you want to make sure that you have the lowest amount of battery degradation. So again, the amount of range, maximum range you have as time goes on will slowly decrease like any battery.
sure.
Um, and so a lot of EV owners were very scared of doing a lot of supercharging because that puts a lot of stress on the battery. The more
Yeah,
stress that gets on the battery, the more resistance it slowly starts to create, which leads to higher amounts of battery degradation. That's simplest way to think of it, right?
yeah,
Um, Same reason why most EV owners aren't recommended to charge all the way to 100%.
mhm,
You're usually going to charge somewhere around 90 to 80%
right.
of your battery, unless you're going on a long road trip because of the amount of stress that it puts on the battery. Same as like when you're plugging in your phone. You plug in your phone, you can plug it into the fastest chargers you want. It'll jump up to 70%, and then it gets real slow.
Yes,
Um,
because it's, monitoring how much electricity comes into the battery, right?
Correct,
Yeah,
because yeah, because
right,
of, since it's nearly full, it can only take in so many electrons. It can't take as many, as it could before.
yeah,
Um,
right,
so
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like this just opens up another world for EV owners to, as well as potential EV owners, to be able to fully take advantage of, um, the vehicle, right? I think, I was speaking to one of my coworkers, um, who also recently purchased a Tesla,
yeah,
and he was saying, he's like, all of this has just been kind of slowly telling me, like, I can just drive my car, like, I don't
yeah,
have to really worry as much as I thought I had to.
mhm.
Um, I just drive my car and then everything's good, like.
Yeah, but you have to pull so, do you think this is my next question really, that charging capability of doing those super fast chargers will become more accessible for homeowners and stuff like that in the near future, like, or in the coming years, you know? The thing I'm thinking about, right, when electric cars started rolling out, they talked about, I forget what the title of this is called, but, inductive charging, yeah, so you can
Mhm.
put, that would be a heavy install rate, I just wanna warn people, but you could have, where you just drive your car over and it's through the concrete charging the battery of your car, right?
Yeah.
Under and that could go at a level that reaches level 3 charging like you're talking about, you know.
Mm, I don't honestly, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I'll explain the reason why. It's because the inductive charging is cool,
Yeah.
but I think it's more of a cool concept, because you're losing a lot of it's similar because it's essentially just like wireless charging, right? Wireless charging for your phone, or anything like that.
Yeah.
The issue that I have with that is that one, your house isn't going to be wired to be able to deliver that amount of electricity. Not like that. You'd have to have like there'd be like a whole different thing that you'd have to do. But two, um, there's just so much loss of energy that would happen within that
Yeah.
transference.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Um,
Yep.
within heat, as well as just, of course, energy not being everywhere.
There's
So it would
really just carrying it away.
yeah, exactly. So you're just losing a lot of energy, and you would be pushing out more energy than you're actually receiving. So I don't think it would actually make sense, honestly. It would be cool.
Yeah.
And I can see it for slower applications, right? I could see something similar to where instead of a parking lot having a whole bunch of like EV chargers, right? It's just EV parking spots. You literally park in there and then boom, you're good to go. I could see something like that, right? It can be a nice slow trickle charger, doesn't have to put out a huge amount of power. And it's just topping you up a little bit, right?
Mhm. Well, and also if you have equipment that's entirely electric, right? Like a blower, lawnmower, those kind of things, you can set it over a panel in your garage and it just charges right back up. That's a great way to make use of it.
Hmm.
Just like you do with your phones currently, like
Yeah.
some of those phones. um, so yeah, that's interesting. So then I guess my next question would be, I know we might be deviating a little bit, but does that leave the level 3 charging for main institutions to sell on the road, you know?
Um, how so? What do you mean by sell?
Well,
Sorry.
so rather than you being able to install it in your house, you have to make sure that you have to go just kind of like how you go to gas stations now,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
they use that as a profit potential.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's always been like that. Any super fast DC charging is just because of the
Right.
infrastructure of it.
Well, and that's why I mean
Um,
is if it will stay that way, right?
yeah, I think so. I think that's just going to be a regular thing. I think it'll be just like gas stations as it is now. I think chargers will eventually become synonymous and have the same, interfaces as regular gas station pumps or whatever like that. It's just it'll be a little bit slower. I do think there are a couple of unforeseen things that we need to work out. One of which I think a lot of people aren't really thinking about or at least talking about. I think, or I don't see a lot of, and happily that we haven't had to deal with that much of it. But I think um, using DC chargers, while they are relatively fast, I uh, they're fast, but I do think there can be something like a safety concern because it's similar to like if you're at a pump, like a gas station pump, but at least within the gas station pumps, you will usually finish filling up within the 5 to 6 minute range or something like that. Where EVs is a little bit longer, so there is a possibility
Sure.
of um more problematic crimes or whatever like that to happen. So I do think that is something to think about. Um, and I think it's something that hasn't really been brought up just because right now we haven't had to worry too much about it. But I do think it is something that as EVs become more and more prevalent, um, more people or we need to probably find better ways to kind of secure that
Sure.
kind of stuff.
I feel that, man. Yeah, I think that that's a good way to look at that. And that's actually something I've been wondering about for a little while. Is how that will all work out. Because for a reason, there's an opportunity there to really gain money off this stuff, just like ExxonMobil and those type of companies do. And
Hmm.
and by the way, I read this thing, bro, that ExxonMobil um, has been lying about how it's changing its focus. When really behind the scenes, it's been rolling out a huge rollout to keep people buying gas from them.
Mm,
Yeah, and I don't fully know what that looks like or what that means for the future, but
interesting.
you have to believe that with those type of companies, there's going to be a battle. You know.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I can, going back to some of the stuff that we've talked about before, I can easily see them, um, being one of the bigger pushers of alternative or synthetic fuels.
Yeah.
Because again, that keeps people in gas powered vehicles that are using, you know, something that maybe they create,
Mhm.
or even, um, you know, requires the stuff that they create or they make, like oil or something similar to that, to continue to keep them in those vehicles for a long haul.
Sure.
So I can see that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's going to be kind of a big thing, right? It's a fight for that.
Hmm.
Um, well, man, I was thinking. So, um, it's just interesting to talk about how our advancements in technology, right? They just bring this like dramatization or really this big um, debate over the future of what they're used for. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, you have to be a lot more believing and in favor of what electric vehicles would be used for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the electrification future is probably most likely going to be our biggest thing.
Yeah.
I think, you know, just looking at a lot of the things that we have to do for climate change, as well as a lot of the new possibilities that renewable energies provide.
Mhm.
I think they do. They of course provide their own challenges, but I think they provide a lot more upsides um, than they have, uh, you know, beforehand. So I do think that is something to think about too.
Yeah, I completely agree. What else did you? I wanted to check in. Where else did you want to lead this topic, bro? Did you have anything
Yeah,
else?
I'm the last thing that I really wanted to talk about too about this is that this also, it's something that I've talked about multiple times before. And in some ways I still kind of stand by it, but I do think that this article helps create a little bit more context in which, a little bit more context when it comes to like other things.
Okay.
Sorry, my brain was trying to go through. So with this lower degradation that you get from using a supercharger or something similar to that, um, what that tells me, and it's something that I've been seeing. I'm a super nerd, so I love to like jump on car forums and all sorts of other things whenever I get a new car or something like that,
Sure.
and get to talk to
Absolutely.
other people who have, whatever the car is that I have.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that I kept hearing, and for a long time, just because of the information that I've known before this article, right, is that I had started to see more and more people who live in apartments getting EVs and charging those EVs solely at superchargers, not charging them anywhere else, but getting those EVs and charging them solely at superchargers. And that is their only means of charging their electric vehicle. And
Why?
that, or sorry,
Why is that their only means?
because they don't have a way, if they're not someone like, for instance, me, I live in an apartment and I charge my EV, and I purchased a garage, right? A garage that's not attached to my apartment unit, but is in my apartment community. I have in a garage. I park my car there, and I can plug it in. Some if someone decides that they don't want to do that, they don't want to, or they can't afford to buy a garage, or there's not a garage available in their community. Um, their only other means of supercharge, or their only other means of charging their vehicle is to supercharge it. And
Yeah.
in some ways kind of takes away some of the advantages of owning an EV, but in some ways it doesn't, right? You're at that point, you're just treating the EV like a gas powered vehicle, and you're still probably coming out at a much cheaper, um, at a much cheaper rate than you would to fill up your own gas powered vehicle. Actually, I think I remember one of my same coworker that I had talked to before. He also lives in an apartment, and
Yeah.
um, he said he went to the supercharger super late at night because there's the way Tesla does it is like there's a surge charging essentially. So it's
Oh, really?
essentially during like high rush hour high
Right.
times where more energy is being used, they up the prices to try to lower the amount of people who are using them. So he said he was at like 20%. He went to the supercharger and charged all the way up to 90%. And he was able to get to that point with
Bless you. Oh
sorry
man,
about that.
he's dabbing on. Bless you, bro.
I am. Thank you. Um, but essentially he was able to get all the way up to 100% from 20% with for like $8.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, that's what people don't understand. I mean, they don't understand how effective that is. I mean, even when you're paying supercharge territory pricing, right?
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's because he was charging it, an off time, off busy times, and so he was able to. Sorry.
No, you're
Um,
good, bro. You're good. No sweat.
yeah, it was non-busy times, and so he got a much cheaper charging rate, and yeah, he got to fill up for a whole $8, which is kind of crazy, right? You
Yeah.
can't get that with gas, not at all.
No.
And so
No.
what I was really trying to say throughout this whole process is that I think this kind of opens it up more to people for more EV owners to show up in um apartment communities, because I have always said, in some ways, like I said, I still kind of say this, but I have always said that it the the barrier to entry is not just the price. It is the requirements in some ways, in some forms or fashion, to have to that in some ways you need to properly use an EV, right? And so that is where the whole I stated this once before, where sure, once you get past the price, you still need to kind of almost have a house,
Yeah.
because you get the advantage of being able to charge at home. You have a more stable charging environment rather than having to do the chaos. I felt like at the time was more chaos charging of being able to go to a supercharger and having to charge up and all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so now that this shows that there's little to no degradation, or at least negligible degradation, than your average degradation, I should really say, from supercharging, that tells me that more people, especially now that Teslas are getting cheaper, right? You can get a used Tesla for, I've seen some for 20 grand, or not 20 grand, but it's closer to like 27 grand,
Okay.
27, 29.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is insane, right? As well, especially as well as the tax incentives that are out there. Um, it makes it even more and more compelling for um, anybody to buy an EV. And so that is one thing that I feel is really, really big about this study, and why it's so important is because, again, it's like I was telling like I said earlier, you can get an EV with all the advantages and just drive it and not
Yeah.
have to worry so much about, like, this or that, or do I need to replace my battery or whatever like that. Plus, there is a certain level of ease of mind that you get because you don't have to worry about looking at when it comes to maintenance wise. um, there's like 2 things that I need to worry about for the most part, which is brake pads and tires, but even brake pads aren't something that I'm gonna be charging or I'm going to be changing a lot. It's super rare.
Yeah.
And tires is something, but that is a little bit more frequent, but it's not that bad. But, when it comes to, like, thinking about road trips, that's even, with a gas-powered vehicle, you wanna make sure all your fluids are topped up, you
Yep.
make sure your coolant's good, you wanna make sure your oil is good, you wanna make sure if you haven't changed your oil, change that oil, you wanna make sure that everything looks good and pristine and, as an
Well,
EV. Oh, go ahead.
no, I mean, that's just a good point. I mean, it's not different. It's just the focus is different. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And honestly, more effective and less time consuming, really.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, to cut you off with that,
No, no, you're good.
but one thing I was thinking too is that I think people often get caught up in if I'm buying an electric car, it's this much more. Oftentimes it is. You just mentioned how like used Teslas, for example, are becoming more affordable.
Mhm.
But it's hard from the outside looking in, man. But if you really like do the math and find out how affordable charging is or could be, and bank on the fact that it's becoming more accessible, and then you say, okay, I get a child or I get not child tax credit, but a car tax credit back if I buy this, right?
Mhm.
What I think it doesn't work for is people that keep cars short term, right?
Mhm.
But if you keep your cars long term, it can end up either averaging out and being better for the environment or being cheaper in the long run, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Yeah, being able to,
And that's
uh,
becoming a growing trend, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you're completely right. I think it's something, yeah, short term, it's not super great, but, I think for sure if you're in the market, but I feel like your short term car buyers usually aren't actually buying their cars, or leasing their cars, so it's a little bit
Right.
different there.
Exactly. Exactly. Like a 3-year lease or something like that, for sure.
E exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But, yeah, I mean, if you're buying a car for a long time, right, like, I know me and my family, we tend to be more people who, um, we drive the car until the tires fall off, is what we usually say. Um,
Yeah.
if you're if you're that type of car buyer, then I think EVs, make a huge amount of sense, and you're saving quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah.
Well, you're not alone.
Yeah, no, I know.
And let's see. I'm sure that there's a lot of other people watching right now that feel the exact same way. So if you feel the exact same way, let us know in the comments, man.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, it definitely is one of those things. And look, this is a change for me. Those people that have watched the show for a long time, they've known that this is something I've learned, and quite honestly, something I've experienced thanks to you, man.
Mhm.
You've been great at showing me and expanding my knowledge on this firsthand. And it's getting to a point where, depending on what you're looking at, probably not for me with my needs or wants right now,
Mhm.
but depending on what you're looking at, if you want a car that could haul a good amount of people and be good on the environment and be affordable in the long haul, you'd want to start looking at electric vehicles, man, especially if the gas is going to go up to 379 again.
Yeah. exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
See, that's crazy. What's really funny about that? I don't even look at gas prices
right? It's kind of mind
anymore.
to think about, to be real.
Yeah. Gas stations, I barely go to those. I go to those to like clean my windshield or I don't know, get something.
Oh, really? Really? That's why it's a convenience store for Denison, man.
It is a convenience store for me.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But see, that's the thing I was thinking of earlier when we were talking about keeping those supercharging abilities only at different locations. Excuse me.
Hmm.
Um, it is just simply, I would say, to build those stores around them and entice people to come in and buy stuff from them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're right.
yeah. I think that's the not too distant future, man. Honestly.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know if you have anything more to add, man, but I think we really kicked this in the tail.
I think so too, man.
Two completely neurodivergent topics, and we wrapped them up together with a little chocolate, a little caramel. Oh man, some Snickers. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Please let us know what you think of this episode by leaving a rating and review. Jump on the live stream with us every Thursday. Give us a follow and make sure you get those notifications so you can jump in and discuss with us in real time. And check out our shop if you want to buy any cool Catch Up Podcast merch. We know you'll love it. I know
Hmm.
firsthand, which is not something you typically brag about with your own merch, but you'll love it. So, with that said, man, I think we have had a good one. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch up with you next week. Yo, yo. Check it out. Yeah, we just did another podcast. Sure had fun. Wasn't a lot of comments, but there was one. All right, y'all. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch up with you next week. That was funny, man.
That was.
I was just willing to try some new things